Welcome back. Next up is our panel titled Educational Data at the University of Michigan. What are we missing? My name is Jen Vetter. I'm a design management lead at the Office of Academic Innovation. My role there involves a lot of wrangling, so I was very grateful and thrilled when Kate asked me to facilitate this panel. So I'll be doing that through our discussion today. So I'm just going to do very brief introductions to our panel. First, you'll recognize Dr. Kate Holman at the end. She is our Associate Director for R&D at the Office of Academic Innovation. Then we have Veronica Falandino, the Associate Director for Admissions and Student Affairs at the School of Information. Dr. Laura Alford, Research Investigator and Lecturer in Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering. And finally, Dr. Ravi Pensy, Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer. So again, this is kind of a lightning talk type round. This might be one of the quickest panels you've done before, but you're ready. Here we go. So let's kick things off with kind of some grounding information. I'm going to ask everyone to share how you currently use data in an educational context within your own work at the university. And whoever would like to start.
Okay, I'll start. So you've heard a little bit about that from me already this morning. I get to think about data across all of our applications and online learning experiences and about innovation. And then I'm also the delegated data steward for all teaching and learning data. And so I'm now seeing that through a totally new lens, thinking very broadly cross-campus.
I think of myself as the applied person in the room in this data conversation. So we use data in a lot of ways in the Office of Academic and Student Affairs at SI, mainly in the areas of reporting, evaluating and assessment, and predicting. And really just to do our daily operations in service of the students. And so that can be anything from as complicated as counting how many students we have, which is not as easy as it sounds like it should be, to trying to predict what enrollment patterns might be like for incoming cohorts, to figuring out how to maximize the number of seats we're offering in growing classes. Since the environment of SI is just explosive growth, new all the time, our models are kind of like non-existent because the model we used last year doesn't work for the model that we have going on this year. So really understanding that combination of science and art combined in our predictive modelings and trying to push harder on more science and less art, because while my intuitions are pretty functional after having been at SI for 12 years, I'd still like to really be able to show the data and have other people engage in the process as well.
Oh, yeah, we're good. I'm gonna turn this one back on again and see if we get feedback. Okay, we might be okay. Whoa. All right, yeah, so I'm Laura. I teach 2 first-year courses. All right, 2 first-year courses in the College of Engineering. So the first class I teach is the large Intro to Programming course. It's got between 500 and 800 students at any given time. We use eCoach. So thank you, Ben, and everybody else at AI for that. And we use that to house all of our corporate memory for the course. When people say, how do I pass the test well, and how do I prepare? We say, go to eCoach and use the exam playbook and such. We also do some surveys and other things through the Computing Cares program. So we tried to track students' perceptions of that course and trying to help include diversity, equity, and inclusion in computer science, even though that's not my home department, but doing my best. The other course I teach is a general Intro to Engineering course. One of my co-instructors is Robin. She's right over there. And this is a project-based, team-based course. And so we do a lot of data collection, trying to catch how we can support teams. And as part of that, then also try to track individuals' contributions to that. But Robin was doing a lot of this and was like, this is really hard because there's a lot of data. And we said, what if we could do it at scale? So that's how we got started with this Tandem project, which is now being developed at AI as well. So this is how can we replicate the support that we give to students on teams, but at scale. And so it is very, very data-driven. They fill out surveys every week. They fill out lessons. And then from that, we customize the support that goes back out to them.
Thank you. My name is Ravi Pensy, as was indicated. I'm fairly new here, in my 5th month, and I'm still here. Considering some of the turnover that had occurred at my position previously. But I'm honored to be here and honored to share with you some of the things related to data. This is the first time in 31 years that I'm not teaching a class, so I plan to fix that in fall. It was a little difficult to come to this complex institution and start teaching the very first semester because I had so much to learn. But in terms of data usage, one of the first questions I asked of my incredible staff members, two of them are here. Vijay is over there, who leads our IQ, and Sean Demoner somewhere, who does with teaching and learning. They do great work. One of the questions I asked them was, can you tell me where is our data? And they looked at me and looked at each other. They all smiled, and they said it's kind of anywhere and everywhere. Okay, so that frankly concerned me just a little bit. But I've been blown away by all the incredible work that has been going on, and I've been paying attention. But I would be remiss if I didn't remind everyone that, and I'm sure we all think about it already, but thinking about privacy as well. That's a great concern because a lot of the projects that were described were amazing. I was in a faculty meeting sometime back where we were talking about students' projects, and we were all excited about collecting students' data and doing wonderful things with it. One of the questions that came up with there was, how do we feel if similar data on faculty were collected? And the conversation and tone changed. So point I'm trying to make there is we have to be very cognizant of the student data that we're collecting. We need to be very transparent about it, and we need to ensure that the privacy of our students is respected. On a lighter note, happy Valentine's Day to all of you. I hope you spend time with your Valentine today, and if you don't have a Valentine in your life, there is always data to love.
Wonderful, thank you. Obviously, our panelists represent different realms around the university. And again, we can kind of go across or whatever order. But overall, across the university, what do you wish we knew more about in terms of data? Our students, courses, programs, majors? What do we wish we knew more of?
Really, when I'm thinking about data, there are a lot of opportunities, and when I was listening to Megan's presentation on mental health, that hit close to my heart. My son, who was actually doing a FaceTime call while I was sitting here, I did not answer, is in India right now, helping with some mental health issues that folks in India are having. So he did a lot of work in mental health and intersection of technology. The reason that area was interesting to me is there are a lot of potentially great opportunities, making sure we're respecting privacy, on how we can do proactive remediation of mental health. For example, many of you may know that the lines to get help from counseling centers are very, very long. It takes days before a young person can get help. So if our students voluntarily choose to wear certain Internet of Things type devices, that's the kind of classes I teach, then it is possible to look at types of things that they're doing in social media and not doing, and provide some proactive remediation if there is a potential sense that a person may be going to a depressive phase. I'm not a mental health expert, I'm a technology expert, but there are opportunities in that space. So I was very excited to see the work that Megan is doing and other possibilities in partnering with our counseling and other centers, and they're very willing to, I think, partner with us. So that's an area where we would like to do more, I think.
All right, so I can sort of continue on with that. So I have this theory that our entire lives are suffering from feature creep. So if you do not know that term, that is when you take a piece of software and you continually add things onto it, whether or not you actually wanted to. And this occurred to me because I've got kids in elementary school, and I feel like at elementary school, they're trying to do this and this and this, and everybody gets really excited about it, but then nothing ever gets cut out in order to make room for the new stuff. And so we've got students that come in, and again, I've got first-year students, so especially in the fall, they are essentially high school students. And I know that they have a lot going on, and I also feel like they have been told you have to do this and this and this and this and all these things to get into U of M, right? Our students are amazing, don't get me wrong, but it's like they've got to speak 4 languages and play 3 sports and 5 musical instruments, and have every single AP credit available and all that. And then you get here, and it's like, we've got to figure out a way to convince them it's okay to let a bunch of that go, to focus on just a few things. But if we had, that's really hard to do because that's a really emotional thing. So we could combat that if we had some data to support. It's okay to do that. Now, I think that it would be really important to get industry buy-in on this, right? Because otherwise they're all gonna say, well, if I go interview with Google, I have to do all this stuff. So if the industry was able to come back, I think most places or most departments have some advisory boards. If you could get some statements to come back and say, hey, look, no, we really are looking for well-rounded people, creative. We want you to be able to get some sleep, and you can't get sleep if you're trying to take 18 credits and do all of this other stuff. So to be able to understand our students' overall life and say, all right, I understand kind of what's going on, help them with that. Because at least in the classes that I teach, it seems that they get in trouble when they don't come. Like that is the single biggest indicator for us, is when they just stop participating. So it's even less so than like when they get stuff done. It's just when they just start to check out. And I feel like you start to check out when you don't have the mental capacity to do anything more. So yes, the feature creep, I think, is really a problem, especially because everybody shows everything on social media, right? But then you only see everybody's really important parts that they want to show you, and you don't see any of the other struggles that individuals go through. Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly describe it as data that we're missing, but rather how we're presenting the data that we have. So when I think about the functional work that happens within our school, our student financials person sees that sort of picture of our students. Our academic success person sees where maybe they're on probation or they're trying to work through incompletes. Our academic advisors see another cut of a person. They're all just cuts. And when we talk about the university really having a value of developing a network of care to support our students, that's really challenging to do when you're only seeing like one subset of a person instead of having like a dashboard for the student, for the staff to be interacting through, so that all of the data is together, so that you can see the patterns that emerge, not just they stop going to class, but also, they have a financial hold because they are having a major financial thing going on, and that's going to impact this, this, and this. And so, I think when we think about privacy and access to data, I do privilege staff in having more access to student data than I might faculty because of the power differentials and the sorts of relationships that a student might have in the classroom. Faculty are amazing first responders. They're going to see a lot of the immediate signs first. But for a staff person or someone to be at the center of gathering all the information and being that data sleuth to really piece together the whole picture of what is this individual student in front of me experiencing, the way that we gather data, report on data, visualize it, for us in my world, it's by function. And so it's naturally in these silos. And so I think the thing that's missing is we try to help the students navigate the university by providing like a portal sort of view for them, but we don't have the same sort of data unity for the staff that are here to support our students.
So this winds up cutting across a number of the other pieces. I did my dissertation work on motivation, and we know remarkably little about what students actually want. We know how they behave, and we know what they earn and how they perform in certain contexts, but we don't hear in an official way, even when you look at something like major data, which is remarkably tricky to navigate and gets reported fairly late when you consider the whole career of a student, right? We are missing that in so many contexts, and it means that we can't respond to places where you are doing this degree because you think it's the safe thing, but you're really passionate about this thing. How do we provide you that parallel recommendation? How do we give you opportunities to fill gaps that would get you to a next thing? Without that, we're going to continue to struggle to figure out how to do that.
The other thing that I think we really need is we need trends. We need trends for individual students. We need trends overall. The student cohorts we know change. They're changing faster and faster and faster, and we have to be able to keep up with that.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's kind of stick a little bit in that same realm and thinking about our students. What role do you think students should play in deciding what data gets collected and how it's used?
I second the transparency thing. You want to take that? You started that in your intro.
No, sure. I mean, obviously, just like, how many of you, just out of curiosity, recently potentially participated in, on Facebook, there was this contest going on. People were challenging each other to post your 10-year pictures, 10-year part. Did anybody participate here? Obviously not. These are data-savvy individuals, right?
I'm not on Facebook. I'm that sad.
So you have a role to play. Make sure you advise your friends, neighbors, others not to do that, because you automatically give Facebook access to a tremendous amount of facial recognition tools for their facial recognition technology they're developing. There are a lot of challenges in these technologies, and again, privacy plays an interesting role. So students have a very important role to play, not only in terms of being stewards of their own data, which means I, in my role, needs to make sure that they have tools available where they have transparent access to their data. And obviously, keeping in mind all the security things. You can't have their grades being splashed in a public space and so on because of rules, but they should have access to that. And in fact, I think it was over the summer, actually a group of students sponsored by ITS produced a student dashboard, which will actually allow students to have transparent access to their data. That's being called by our security teams to see what is available, but students will be able to go there and look at all of their data that's being collected. But once that is done, then there are a lot of opportunities available for students to opt out of certain things, and there are other things that they couldn't opt out of because of traditional reasons.
So I believe very strongly that we need to have a lot of transparency. I also want us to have conversations with students about data literacy and to be informed about why we're doing this and why we believe it's important to collect this data in order to improve education. It's very easy to be reactive pulling your data, and I think Chris Brooks would want me to channel pretty strongly the degree to which we will lose a really important understanding of what's actually happening if we aren't thoughtful about removing data.
Yeah. Yeah, I struggle with this a bit because my instinct is I want more data than a student might be willing to share and share broadly. And I think I'm trying to unpack what is baked into that fear. And I think a lot of it is the perception of stigmatization around what the data might say about a student and who might have access to that. And so I want it all. I want the full picture of the student because I want to best serve the student. But I recognize, a student might choose to not disclose that they have a formal accommodation registered with a faculty member for a particular class. And there are times when they really need to, but I can't make them. I can just advise them. Like, I'm here as a mentor and a guide. And if I have the information, I can do my best in that role. And so I get a little bit to this, what is the data, but who has access to the data, and around the transparency of how are we using it, who can use it. And I think the work has to happen in tandem around the stigmatization of what data are people afraid that might be out in the world, and where does that fear come from, and what is the work that we can be doing separate from data and data privacy to unpack that stigmatization.
I have actually a question for the rest of you guys. So I wonder if students would buy into this more, feel more comfortable if we had a conversation or something, but like we're in a really weird situation, right? Technically, for the most part, our students are 18 years or older, so they are adults. But they're in this real transition period, right? It's in college, there's time and place for everything. It's called college. And so they're learning so much about themselves. They evolve and they change so much. And so they graduate. And at that point, then I think our goal is that they can go out and be aware of themselves and the data that they are and all that kind of stuff. But I wonder if we talk to them and say, hey, we recognize that this is this really weird transitional period. We can do more to help you if you can give us this data. And we love all data. We think it is all really cool and fascinating. So somebody gets like, oh, I have this. I'm like, really? Like, tell me, why do you have this? Like, I want to know because that is who you are. But I don't know. I wondered if we were kind of transparent about that with our relationship and saying like, hey, we know this is kind of weird, but this is what we can do if you let us. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So an example at my former institution, what we did was we partnering with students. We rolled out a service where what we had done was looked at the Wi-Fi data that's available. Here also it's available. And based on the Wi-Fi data, we were able to correctly predict the amount of time a person would spend in cafeterias, standing in line. It was important because students were missing lunches because there was not enough time. Mm-hmm. And so then we connected that data with the enrollment data, Again, this was all only opt-in basis. And then what we were able to do was connect those two data sets where then we could prompt the students at lunchtime saying, hey, Joey, looks like you just got out of this particular class. On your way, there are 3 cafeterias and wait times are 4 minutes, 6 minutes, and 90 minutes. And that was an extremely popular service that students loved, but that was on an opt-in basis. To your point of two data sets being connected together to do these things, and I can share many, many other stories related to data, and I'm happy to engage with you offline of many such examples. But I did have borrowing from you, I did have a question for all of you, and maybe I would like to see a couple of answers from you if possible. Just one quick question. If you go back to your from kindergarten to college days, or if you're still in college right now, what is one characteristic of your favorite teacher that stands out in your mind? If I asked you one characteristic of your favorite teacher that stands out in your mind. I'll just take a couple of answers for respect of time. Can somebody shout it out? Favorite characteristic of your teacher that stands out in your mind?
Encourage exploration.
Sorry?
Encourage exploration.
Encourage exploration.
And passion?
Passion. So passion, encourage exploration. Anybody else? Personalization. Okay, personalization. So please notice in none of this, anybody saying one who has been using data. I want you to keep that in mind. Now, personalization may involve appropriate use of data, so it is connected, but I want to remind you that this is only to augment what we do. So it's a credit to our brilliant teachers like Gus and Veronica and others who are passionate enough to use the data to augment and enhance the connection that they can derive and establish with their students. So I just wanted to remind people.
I'm going to flip us over to some audience questions that are coming through that kind of to keep going on that topic. There's one that came in from Anonymous. I'm all for transparency, but how do we ethically use the data we collect to intervene in a student's educational experience? There's a danger of becoming Big Brother. We've talked a little bit about mental health in that aspect. Are there other areas how we can ethically use that data to intervene?
So I think one of the things that you can do in that space is really to borrow from some of the ways that medicine does intervention, and that's to expose it, right? To say, hey, we know this thing about you, and here's what we know that other students have done in this context. Consider these options, right? I don't have any interest in determining people's fate, right? But providing them with informed choices based on history feels like there are moments where it is appropriate. Not all. But it feels like an opportunity.
Okay, just a quick comment related to that. Again, I fully understand where the question is coming from the concern around ethics, and that's where we have to be careful. That's why I think one of us pointed out that when students are here, they're 18 years or older, they're adults, considered adults, yet still they're learning. So we need to do that in partnership with them. We need to do that, and we should also ask that question, how would we feel about that as we are launching these experiments? If I was going to use somebody else's data. Recently, there was an uproar when Mark Zuckerberg talked about combining the messenger service with WhatsApp and Instagram, the backend, and what that will do to different people who may be using those platforms and some who don't. And how would that feel? And there was a huge uproar because of that issue around ethics and privacy. So we need to be very cognizant. We need to think about that while fully recognizing the importance of leveraging these data sets, because they are meant to really enhance instruction and help the amazing young people who come to our institution who are going to impact and change the world.
I like the parallels to medicine. I think we can learn from that.
So there's an interesting question of, okay, Gus showed some visualizations of gender performance difference, right? We can tell that women on average perform more poorly in a physics class on average. Do you tell somebody that they're likely to reduce their GPA?
Not unless you can tell them why.
But even then, you're entering a physics class and you're a woman, and we know that probabilistically you are likely to earn lower than your GPA. I don't know.
Okay, I have to speak up on this one. I really have to. The reason I'm saying that is it's Valentine's Day. My wife will love me even more now. She's a physics graduate, Gus. Kudos, yay to your field. And early in her life, she had a class, believe it or not, on string theory. That's why I got that attention, and the professor will remain nameless. And this was in that era when it was mostly men. And the professor actually made a comment to her saying, I'm not used to teaching female students. They usually don't do very well in physics. Long story short, she has done very well in her life, and then that's the challenge. And that's where we have to be very careful of how we see data is there, but how we interpret the data is important, and that's where the human connection is critical. So my wife would have listened to that jerk, she would have dropped out. So she didn't.
Yeah.
Great. All right, we'll keep going through at least one or two more questions. How can educational data help us move toward a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive university?
Got it.
You got it.
One.
All right.
I got one.
Veronica's on
No,
it.
I like if I can talk about one thing when I'm here, I want to talk about this. I think we do a great job of collecting data about students in all different kinds of ways. I don't think we are looking critically at what the data tells us about the people collecting the data and the people creating policies and procedures based on what the data is telling us. I think if we did, we could potentially identify systems of oppression and exclusion that we are perpetuating with the policies that are being driven by this data. And I think if we can look critically at ourselves and what the data tells us about ourselves, we could identify the implicit biases that we are perpetuating in the policies being created. I want to share one quick parable to make this a real concrete thing. So we at the School of Information looked at 10 years worth of application comments made by reviewers and did an analysis of that content and did identify that we had a problem with our review process. That is an ugly experience, right? It doesn't feel good to think that you're doing the right thing, you're participating in this holistic review, and like, oh, by the way, it's actually not good for you if you're an African-American man applying. How do we fix that? You can't fix it unless you cast light on it and give it the light of day and say, hey, we do have a thing going on here, how do we undo it? And so I think really looking critically at what we do and using the data to analyze ourselves will allow us to break down some of the systemic barriers that are in place in higher education that is really creating barriers for marginalized populations in lots of different ways. I think the areas around mental health is another facet that we can be looking at. How are we talking about students that we're serving? What do academic advisors' comments look like? How can we tease out where the problems really are and then change our policies and practices? You have to identify it, but then you have to act on it. So we at the School of Information identified that the GRE was being overused for marginalized populations in not great ways. So we no longer accept the GRE for our Master of Health Informatics and our Master of Science and Information. And I'm pretty confident by the end of this year, I will say that we will also not accept the GRE for our PhD because it is a flawed tool that is grounded in stereotype threat and really just tells us what your zip code is. So there are many other things in an admissions review process that don't perpetuate bias and exclusion. So let us use the data to make ourselves better, not just support our students in better ways.
Yeah. Is that sufficient, or should we continue to talk? I mean, that seems pretty good. I would say, just one of them is, so we get lots of data. It often seems like it gets reported in aggregate form, which has some positives to it. However, when it comes down to it, these are still individual students we are talking about, and if they are forever lost within these big buckets of gender and socioeconomic status and race and stuff, then we lose that. So that's one thing is yes, make some decisions up here, but also remember how the individual paths, how they go through the university. The other thing is going back is who's looking at the data. So I'm like, okay, we don't have a super ton of diversity on this little panel. We're not terrible, but it could still be better. But to make sure that we can get more people, we need just more people analyzing the data, period, because I am not an expert in this. For me to become an expert, I have to go get another PhD, and I have enough degrees. I don't want any more. But I would love to hypothesize questions and then help interpret results, but I do not have the time to actually do the data processing. But there's all these people that are getting data science major degrees and stuff. Let us go hire a good diversity of them and say, hey, help us plow through this stuff and give us good interpretations so we can look at our policy. Okay. Anybody else?
Okay, we're going to finish up with one more question. So for our very last question as a wrap up, from your individual vantage points, and I'm going to tweak this question a little bit, what do you see as the biggest challenge and therefore the biggest opportunity regarding educational data in your realm?
I think I just said mine. I need help processing it. Like, to be honest, like when Kate asked me if I do this, I'm like, I'm gonna come on and say that we do not do a good job processing all this data. Is that okay? She's like, yes, that is okay to say. But no, we have a lot of potential resources, but we need help closing that loop. We get the data, we maybe sometimes look at a little bit of it, and then it just falls off the wayside. Like I forget now what it was, but I actually got a report from somebody that they'd done a bunch of data, and we got a report, which like almost never happens, right? But the data was from like 4 years ago or something. Like, wait, all right, the students had changed in the meantime. This is good, but not very timely. We need faster feedback and faster closing loop, and getting back to the students of, hey, you gave us all this data. This is what we're doing with it. This is how we can help. So like hey, you gave us your location data. Now we can tell you what cafeteria to go to. It's like, there is a benefit to me as a student. Okay, I feel more comfortable helping you guys out because I'm getting something back. Who wants to go next? Okay.
Yeah, it's similar. It's the resource of time. So this is just a small example, but I oversee registration and curriculum for the school. A lot of students who aren't our students want to take our classes. I want to be able to let as many non-UMSI students take our classes as possible, but we are growing so quickly and demand is growing so quickly, our prediction models, like I was saying earlier, aren't the best because they're changing so quickly. I want to look at what was our external demand by semester? How many overrides did we issue? How many actually went unused? How many people melted from the class? I know what questions I want to ask to be able to understand the demand patterns better. I don't have the time. We have really full jobs, like all of us, right? And I could eventually carve that out. Like the things that become summer projects, because that's when we have time to stop and think, are monstrous. And so it is that, how do you make a significant portion of your work life about taking a moment to think about the data and what we could be asking and what we could be collecting and then analyzing to do our work more efficiently when we're like flying by the seat of our pants through the season. So whether it's the whole role, whether it's designated within each role, but there is the throw the experts at it, but I think there's also the how do you make time in your own expertise for
feature
making
creep.
it. Yeah, I like that. Good theme.
So I would say that for myself, the opportunity is the wealth of data that we have, and the peril is a theme that arises constantly in research, which is your outcomes depending on the context, and we miss so much of the context if we just throw an army of data scientists at it. We need a commitment and a collaboration that has us doing analysis in tandem with, with the actual teams who can bring us the insight as to why that data looks the way it does, and not just over-assume that these things exist.
So as I learn more from amazing teachers across Michigan our data sets and frames here, one of the goals we have set for ourselves is not just thinking about academic data, but all institutional data to allow for those connections. So we have a very fascinating work going on right now being led by Jim, Bim, Vijay, and many, many other ITSers and beyond. And the goal for the institution is really, on an opt-in basis as appropriately, imagine a life a couple of years from now, maybe sooner, maybe slightly later, where you get a Google-like box, you type the question you have in plain English language. You don't have to know any SQL queries, don't have to do anything, just plain English language, just like you do Google search. The system at the back end pull data from the appropriate sources and provide you the answer that you need on a role basis, meaning the questions the president of the institution can ask, and the answer she will get will be different from I would ask in my role and others. That's our vision for data here, and that's very doable, that's very possible, because then we will become a data-informed and data-empowered community, and I believe in data-informed decision-making, not data-driven decision-making. There's a difference between the two. Data-informed does not take people out of the loop. Data-driven takes people out of the loop. People, our amazing teachers, scholars, they all need to be in loop. Data should augment the decisions we make, not drive. So our goal is to have a data-empowered community at Michigan, and that will happen with support from all of you and the work that we're doing. And again, keeping in mind the privacy aspects. Cannot remind you more about that. So
how would I mean, so like Robin and I do all this stuff, and like every time we come up with some new question to ask ourselves about how our class is working and stuff. We go and we set up a little project, and we have to get another IRB for it and stuff like that. So like, could this all be sort of housed under one big set? It's all private, and you can just go and use it, because otherwise, like you said, like I have this question, but now I have to write up this and do, and like now it's 6 months later before I can actually go back and look at the data. Okay.
So potentially that's our goal eventually, but that doesn't mean we want to keep building data warehouses. That's not a good design for future. It's not a good idea to keep building more and more data warehouses. But the idea would be to pull the data from where it is, and this ties in also with our endowment data, because we just completed our $5 billion campaign. We want to raise a few more billions down the line to support our amazing students and faculty. So all of that needs to be connected from cradle to grave. So when you think about our core competencies, it's about creating new knowledge through research. It's about teaching and learning. And it's about archiving that knowledge so future generations can benefit from it. And all of that can be supported and empowered by data. So that's our goal.
All right, for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you so much for all your questions, and please join me in thanking our panelists.